The Panthers were unable to clinch the Stanley Cup at home as once again the Edmonton Oilers get in on the score sheet early and get up by multiple goals. And by the time the Florida Panthers tried to make it a game, it was too little, too late.
You're Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome into this Wednesday, June 19th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. I'm Armando Velez from the Hockey News. You can follow me on X at MondoMan12, follow show account on X and Instagram at LO_FLA Panthers. And shout out to the everydayers who come back here and get your daily Florida Panthers fix. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms and conditions apply. So the Florida Panthers got down by as much as 3-0 in Emirates Bank Arena for Game 5 last night with a chance to clinch the Stanley Cup. But for the second straight game, it was the Oilers penalty kill who set the tone with a shorthanded goal to really, which for the Panthers once again was really backbreaking for them in any attempts to come back. And once again with the Edmonton Oilers, a team that likes to get out early and plays better when ahead, it proved the Panthers costly giving up that shorthanded goal. And however, the Panthers did make it a game by making it a 4-3 score 4 minutes into the third period, but the Edmonton Oilers survived and now this series is a 3-2 series lead for the Panthers as the series has shifted back to Alberta for Game 6. But it is a Wednesday, which means it is a Winans Wednesday edition of the show. Jacob Winans is here to break down this 4-3 Florida Panthers loss against the Edmonton Oilers from Emirates Bank Arena. And Jacob, welcome back to the show. We were kind of feeling ourselves a few days ago after last Thursday, where the Florida Panthers took a 3-0 series lead, and now multiple punches to the gut for the Panthers now that they are in this position, having to try to clinch a Stanley Cup on the road.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it. I fully expected this to be a show recapping a clinching game and celebrating a Stanley Cup, and that's not where we're at right now. I guess going into the series, I expected a long series. I didn't expect to take a 3-0 lead and see them kind of squander it, but I did expect a longer series. I thought it would go 6. It's not how I expected it to get here, but this is where they're at now, and it's a really, really hostile building they're about to have to go play in. They didn't look good there the other night. Losing 8-1 was pretty deflating. We've seen what this looks like. The Panthers have been in a similar position. They were down 3-1 to Boston and just kind of stormed all the way back. That momentum is real and it can carry you far. And right now, Connor is playing the best hockey that anyone has seen in the past 50 years, almost 40, in the past 40 years at least. They're in a tough spot right now. We'll see how they handle it on Friday, but this is less than ideal, the position that the Panthers are in now. It doesn't feel like they're up 3-2, but at the end of the day, they just got to get one game.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like they are up 3-2 with, it's crazy what a few days can do for a team. And I mean, these last two games, Connor McDavid, 7 points in the last two. Now he's 6 away from the all-time postseason record in the Stanley Cup playoffs. And if the Panthers win on Thursday and Connor McDavid wins the Conn Smythe, I don't care. It's a team award more than an individual. So now we're entering that territory for this Stanley Cup final. And I mean, really, when you think about it, for the Panthers, just the amount. Not only was it the errant pass from Montour that Connor Brown went on the breakaway, but also how much faster he was to the puck for against Aleksander Barkov right before that breakaway. And also for the Panthers, just taking silly penalties at one after an icing, whether we want to argue whether that was a legitimate call on Okposo too. Also a penalty at the end of the second period after the first period, where now Edmonton Oilers were getting a power play on fresh ice going into the long change period too. That's a really dangerous territory for the Panthers to just put themselves in. And even though there was too many men on the ice that was missed for the Edmonton Oilers there, I mean, with a chance to go on the power play, I mean, Tkachuk was called for an embellishment too, which maybe Tkachuk fell down a little bit easily there too, but also just board battles too, not stopping the speed. I mean, Gustav Forsling was a little bit on an island there after that dump in by Bouchard, where Foegele retrieved the puck right before McDavid crossed up Bob. So, a little bit of a tough position for Forsling to be there too. But good news is Evan Rodrigues got his 4th goal of the series. Tkachuk has come alive now after some line changes too. I'm surprised that the line changes didn't come earlier for putting Erod back on that second line and Verhaeghe back on that top. But you had a few guys activated too here. We weren't expecting to see 8-1 for the Panthers, but when you're playing from behind, and even though you dominate the possession in the last 40 minutes, I'm just constantly thinking, where was this in the first 20?
Yeah, it's the second game in a row that the Panthers just didn't start on time, and there's really no excuse for it this time of year. You've had 2 chances now to put your best foot forward in the first period, take control of the game and win a Stanley Cup, and they've laid an egg both times. The first period in Edmonton was absolutely horrible. Everything that they could possibly do wrong in that period, they did wrong. And you expect them to come out in Game 5, home crowd behind you. The building was on fire. You expect them to come out with a little bit more urgency, and they did push for the first few minutes. But it's just the physical effort. Yeah, it felt like it was there for the first couple minutes, but then just a crushing mental error from Montour. Barkov doesn't hustle back, and you end up down 1-0 on a shorthanded goal again. It's the exact same story as Game 4. And it deflated the building, took everything out of the team, and just for the rest of the period, it was like they went into a shell. They stopped shooting. The defense was scrambling. It was really, really bad for the first 20 minutes after a pretty good start. And Skinner made a couple big saves to keep things even and give the Oilers time to get that lead. But scoring first is going to be key in Game 6, because it's a different game when the Panthers get scored on first, especially on a shorthanded goal. And we can get into the officiating. You mentioned it. Third period, the officiating was bad. A blatant too many men call that gets missed. The embellishment call on Tkachuk was bad. If you watch the replay, it's not, he didn't dive. It was his skate. He toe picked after getting hooked. His skate got caught in the ice and he went down. So that's just a bad call. The missed call on Forsling behind the play. Bouchard stops a breakout by slashing Forsling while he's on the ground. There were a couple of really, really obvious missed calls, but it's also hard to complain about officiating when the Panthers power play has been as bad as it's been. The Oilers have scored more goals on Panthers power plays than the Panthers have. So going on the power play doesn't necessarily mean a goal for us anyway. It's tough to complain about the calls when your power play is as lifeless as it's been.
Yeah, and making that switch to OEL, now going back on the top power play unit. I actually looked up the numbers when OEL was on the first power play unit in the first 16 games when Montour was hurt. The Panthers power play was 16, just under 17% for the first 16 games of the season. So a little bit of what that's worth. But I do think that with OEL being the point guy on the power play, you're not seeing him as much. You're seeing him more above the hashes. So if there is that opportunity for that shorthanded chance going back, you don't need OEL to go back as much, where Montour is that guy who's more speed of going to the hashes or below too. So I think that's why that change was made too for Paul Maurice and company. But we're going to transition over to segment number 2. We're going to discuss more of our 3 duds of the game and the moment when we thought this game was lost. We're going to discuss that and more next on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. And Game Time is an authorized marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, view from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets. With last-minute deals, you could save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, concert, comedy, theater, and more. Save even more with exclusive in-app deals on select seats ahead of the game or event. All-in pricing, toggling this feature shows you your total upfront with no surprises and fees at checkout. Get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. The lowest price guarantee or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticket industry. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON NHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Welcome back into this Wednesday, June 19th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day here on a Wednesday. And are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Had to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you the can't miss analysis, opinions, and news 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And here with Jacob Winans once again to break down this 5-3 loss for the Florida Panthers against the Edmonton Oilers from Sunrise, Florida. And so let's start with 3 duds of the game for the Panthers. Number 1, I'm going to go Brandon Montour. Just to start off the game with that turnover and then being replaced on that power play. One, you gotta hit a breaking point if you're gonna replace someone where he's been that guy ever since last season, even the majority of this season coming back from injury. So in this pressure situation where you're taken out in the most important time in a contract year too, that's got to be my number 1 dud for the Panthers. Number 2, I'm going to go with Sergei Bobrovsky. I know breakaways, rush chances against for the Panthers, for the Oilers, excuse me, and 3 of the 5 goals were on special teams, but you wish this is the one time. I know Henrik Lundqvist talks about the RVH, but that's the one time you want to see Sergei Bobrovsky maybe go to the RVH, as he was a little bit crossed up on that sharp angle shot by McDavid. And the third one, I'm going to go a little bit. It's not going to be a player. I'm going to put it on the coach, Paul Maurice, here as the third dud. Once again, I'm surprised that he didn't do any of the shakeups with putting Verhaeghe back on that top line, which Verhaeghe has 1 goal in the series. Sam Reinhart has 1 goal in the series too, for what that's worth. But I gotta put the third dud for the coach there for those adjustments. But credit to him though, it was activated once he made those changes. Who are your 3 duds, Jacob?
Yeah, my 3 duds. I'm gonna go with the number 3. I'm gonna go the entire top line of Barkov, Reinhart, Verhaeghe. Barkov is the Selke Trophy winner. He's responsible for being that defensive anchor of the forward group, and Connor McDavid has walked all over him 2 games in a row. 8 points in the last 2 games for Connor McDavid. Barkov, if I'm not mistaken, has been held pointless the last 2 games, and McDavid has scored 8 points. That's top line center on top line center, and you're getting absolutely dog walked. So that's a problem where that's concerned. And Sam Reinhart defensively hasn't really been a difference maker after finishing as in the top 5 on Selke voting this year as well. And then Carter Verhaeghe, he's been invisible since game 1. He scored the opening goal of the series and has not tallied a point since. The shooting doesn't seem to be on target. It's a lot right into the chest protector. He's not aiming high blocker, which Skinner has struggled with in this series. High glove, they beat him a couple times yesterday, and every Carter Verhaeghe shot has gone low. He's got to find his shot. So the top line's my number 3 dud. Number 2 is Brandon Montour. For many of the same reasons that you gave, but he's been all over the place defensively. The Montour-Mikkola pair has been the worst deep pair the past couple of games. Mm-hmm. And then on the power play, Montour's been responsible for 2 shorthanded goals against in the last 2 games. Game 4 slides into Bob, takes him out of the play. And then game 5 throws one to no man's land. Connor Brown gets a shorthanded goal, and it's back-breaking early in the game. So Brandon Montour has to pick it up in game 6 if they want to win this series. Number 1 dud for me is Bob. The goals, you can't necessarily say they're his fault, but you need to win a cup. You gotta have a goalie who's going to at least steal you a save or 2. And if Bob makes one more save, steals one of those goals, the Panthers are in overtime last night, and he didn't do it. He didn't get the steal of a save, and then also the Connor McDavid goal, the sharp angle shot. That's just, you can't let that in. In the Stanley Cup final, that's not one that can get past you. I'm not really sure what he was doing on that play. He looked shaky most of the night, and that was the worst one. If the Panthers come back and win, it's a different story last night, because Bob did make that huge save on Ryan Nugent-Hopkins in the 3rd period, and I hope that's something he can take confidence-wise. He made a big save that could have been a difference maker, but really, really horrible second period for Bob. 2 games in a row. His save percentage in the last 2 games is around 75%, giving up 6 goals a game in the last 2 games, or just under 6 goals a game, or maybe just over. I have to double check the stats there, because he did get pulled in game 4, but it's not good enough right now from Bob in the last 2.
Yeah, and that save on Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, Kulak weaved around Sam Reinhart and Aleksander Barkov skating out of the zone too. So that's another thing of what made that save even bigger for the Panthers there, and they were down 4-3 after that. So thought that was a remember that save type of moment for the Panthers, thinking that they were going to get something out of it. You spoke about the high glove. OEL's goal was high glove after Matthew Tkachuk battled it down low and got it back to the slot, which Panthers, credit to them, they were able to get that turnover on Adam Henrique as he was exiting out of the zone. And I mean, I'm just thinking of all the goals that the Panthers scored against, and thinking which are the ones that maybe you could see that Bob maybe could have had outside of that McDavid sharp angle shot, because that Bouchard bomb, the Zach Hyman's in front of the net, a lot that you can't do there. The breakaway by McDavid before he got it to Corey Perry, that's just a matter of too many eyes on McDavid. Yeah, he's the best player in the world, but you're abandoning that weak side too when you're seeing him go. You have 3 guys on, and that assist by McDavid kind of reminded me of a goal he had against the New York Rangers maybe last year or the year before. It was right before Georgiev got traded to Colorado. Weaves through the defense and then goes backhand there, except this one it was an assist. And Connor McDavid, you mentioned Aleksander Barkov, no points in the last 2 games. He's a -4. Connor McDavid has 7 in the last 2. So what, we're talking about Barkov in the matchup. We've seen a game with no last change, and we have seen a game with last change now too. So that's a little bit of an alarm now for the Panthers there when seeing how McDavid has just taken over, because we spoke about the depth scorers in the first 3. Now that he's getting in on the scoring, it's like I said, concern meter was a 2 last time, and I said it at the end of the show that it was going to be a 6 they lost. It's still a 6 for me.
Yeah, mine's a little bit higher. I'm hovering around a 7 or an 8 right now, because like you said, Connor McDavid was radio silent the first 3 games, and then all of a sudden explodes in Game 4, and he's reached another level. And my concern is that the Panthers that there's no one on the Panthers roster who can stop it. And Barkov is the best defensive forward in hockey, and if he's getting torched like this, there's really not a whole lot else you can do. So that alone is very concerning. And if you let Edmonton win Game 6 at home, it becomes a 1-game series. And in a series where it's 1 game decides it, the team with the best player in the world is the likely team to win that. McDavid is capable of taking over 1 game by himself. So that's a big concern for me. Another big concern for me is the fact that Leon Draisaitl has been so quiet. If he comes alive, we could be in some really, really serious trouble. So that's another thing that has my concern level high. I think Bob can get back to at least average stats. I think that could be a saving grace here. And if the Panthers top line gets going, maybe they turn out to be okay. But yeah, big concern for me is McDavid and our inability to stop him.
Yeah, you mentioned Draisaitl, only 2 points in the series, and both of them came in Game 4. So, yeah. So if I know it's a good thing that the Panthers are stopping him, but you also got to stop the best player in the world. Easier said than done for the Panthers there. We're running a little bit long on the show here, so we're actually gonna switch the moment when we thought this game was lost, in segment number 3, and we're gonna discuss more about the mindset going into a 2-day gap in between games 5 and 6. We're going to discuss that next here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Segment number 3 here on this Wednesday, June 19th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day here on a Wednesday, and here with Jacob Winans once again to break down this 5-3 loss for the Florida Panthers against the Edmonton Oilers, where still crazy to think at the end that Matthew Tkachuk had that save where he extended the stick, but then Connor McDavid got that empty netter there. So still the Panthers had a chance to make something happen there at the end when they pulled the extra attacker with 2:31 left in the game. But the moment where we thought this game was lost for me was when it was 3-0. 3-0 is hard to come back from, and crazy to think that even though the Edmonton Oilers went up 4-1, the Panthers responded back to cut it right back down to 2. But still, it was a little bit of getting your hopes up there for the Panthers there on the there. But how about your moment where you thought this game was lost, Jacob, on Tuesday night?
Yeah, for me, I want to say it was the Connor McDavid sharp angle goal on Bob. I felt like that was going to be an insurmountable comeback, but the Panthers sort of proved me wrong a little bit, fighting back. But the moment where I thought the game was lost was the tripping call on Dmitry Kulikov in the third period. Panthers had all the momentum at that point in time. They were pushing. They were living in the Oilers zone, and then Warren Foegele draws a tripping call on Dmitry Kulikov, which at that point in time in the game, I don't love that call. Not because it wasn't a trip; it was definitely a trip. It's a by the rule book, that's a tripping penalty, and you can't really argue that. My issue was after everything that the refs had let go in that period, the Oilers got away with so much. For the Panthers to not get a power play at all in that third period was honestly, I've got no explanation for it. The Tkachuk embellishment is just a horrible call. The miss too many men, can't understand that. ESPN, I have my own thoughts on the way they've broadcasted this final. But their explanation on the too many men was just ridiculous. It was too many men. They played the puck twice with 6 guys on the ice. There was a point there where you could argue they had 7 on the ice and played the puck. It's a brutal miscall. And there were a couple other ones that were just awful to swallow the whistle. So when we get the tripping call on Kulikov, I felt like that completely killed the momentum, threw the Panthers off their game and ended the push that they had there. It allowed Edmonton to regain control of the game. So that's the moment where I felt they lost.
Yeah, and that penalty by Dmitry Kulikov right before that, the second line had a chance with a slightly open net, but really couldn't get their stick on it. Sam Bennett was the one who had the feed right in the middle for that. But hey, the Edmonton Oilers really closed it out the middle of the ice. And you think about the 3 goals that the Panthers scored, only one of them was really below the hashes. I mean, the second one for the first one that Matthew Tkachuk scored, Evan Bouchard was really up in the zone where the Matthew Tkachuk was able to get a slight breakaway to beat Stuart Skinner there too. But one thing that's encouraging still for the Panthers for me is the fact that sometimes they have found ways to expose the Edmonton Oilers defense. I mean, we've seen it with Darnell Nurse. We saw it with CC. And in this one, we saw it with Evan Bouchard. Even though he's been great, he has the record for most points by a defenseman in a Stanley Cup playoff too. So the Panthers have picked their spots here and there. So, and one goal against was at 5 that they had was on 5-on-5 out of the 5. So that's, for me, looking back at that. How are you feeling? How are you feeling overall about the Panthers 5-on-5 play? Because I would like to think that this would be more 5-on-5 as the series goes on, and this would be in favor of the Panthers. But when your special teams is 2 of 4 on the night, that it's going to be backbreaking.
Yeah, the refs have had their hands on this series way too much, and I'd like to see in the last couple of games just a little less of the ref show. I mean, some of the slashing and the cross checking and stuff. These are everyday garden variety playoff hockey plays, and if you're not going to call it both ways, then don't call it at all. Yesterday's game was just really frustrating. It felt like a special teams battle. It was not enough 5-on-5 play for a Stanley Cup final for me. With that said, I think the Panthers are okay at 5-on-5 right now. They've got to start finishing a little better, but to me, the 5-on-5 versus special teams is almost secondary to scoring first and getting to the forechecking game.
Yes.
I don't care if it comes on special teams, 5-on-5, 4-on-4. I don't care how you have to score first. Edmonton is so night and day different when they're playing ahead versus playing behind. The recipe to beat the Oilers is that forechecking game, and the Panthers haven't really gotten a chance to get to it since game 3. You saw the third period where the Panthers finally got to have some possession. Finally got to play the dump and chase, throw it in behind Skinner, force him to play the puck. Skinner has a tendency to be a little bit slow making that pass from behind the net. That extra second counts because when the defenseman gets the puck, there's a Panther already in his face. You throw a hit on that defenseman, he may turn it over. We've seen Darnell Nurse do it. We've seen Evan Bouchard do it. We've seen Cody Ceci do it. You're not going to create a ton of chances off the rush against Edmonton. If you do get rush chances, they're such a fast team and they can often close that gap. The only way to beat these guys is that heavy forecheck. The Panthers haven't had a chance to do that much in the last 2 games, but we saw the result in that third period when they were able to get back to that identity. They really controlled that whole third period, and they got close to tying it. And I feel like if they had tied it, keep playing the same way, and they probably win the cup in overtime. And shoulda, coulda, woulda, definitely. But the one encouraging thing that I pull from that game is that the Panthers finally got back to their style of play in that second half of the game. And if you carry that into game 6, I do feel better about their chances.
Yeah, and you want to see more of getting into Stuart Skinner's kitchen too, with second and third chance opportunities, which you're looking for the Matthew Tkachuks, the Sam Bennett's too, and then those guys who could shoot from distance, and Carter Verhaeghe, Sam Reinhart, who only have 1 goal each in the series. And I mean, For what it's worth, Stuart Skinner has gotten better as the series has gone on. I mean, even though there were parts of the second round series where Calvin Pickard was in, but 939 save percentage, 1.56 GAA in games 4 to 6 this postseason too. So first period is going to be crucial for the Edmonton Oilers. I mean, period by period, plus 12 goal differential for Edmonton, plus 12, -7 for Edmonton. While the Panthers are on the minus side in the first period, but plus in the last two. It's really going to come down to those first really 30 minutes. I mean, if it's 0-0, I know we're getting too ahead of a little ahead of myself. If it's 0-0 after that first period, I mean, you got to be taking a big exhale after that. But really, if you get that forecheck early, then you'll feel in control of the game, because we saw it even in game 3. No reason for me to believe that they can't win another game in Edmonton to bring the cup home.
Yeah, the Panthers have proven it on the road all season. It's not like this is a team that can't win when their backs are against the wall. They've done it time and time again. You look at Boston; they had a chance to close that series out at home. They didn't do it. They have to go to Boston in Game 6, and it's very similar to the storyline we're hearing right now. Panthers were up 3-1 in that series. You expect that they're going to close it out at home. They don't. Brad Marchand comes back. All the momentum is with Boston. Boston scores first in that game. It's Panthers' backs were against the wall in that one, and they came through at the end. But it wasn't a track meet. It wasn't a high scoring game. It was 2-1 game. It was low scoring, and you have to get that the game winning goal at the end and play tight checking, and that's the only way the Panthers are going to get this done. If you get into a high scoring battle with Edmonton, a track meet, run and gun, you're in really big trouble, because Edmonton's always going to beat you if that's the style you're playing. So keep it 0-0 in the first period. Maybe get the first goal of the game in the first period. If you can't, at least keep it 0-0, but play a perfect defensive game. And the pressure shifts back to Edmonton as the clock gets lower and lower. If it's a close game, my advantage goes to Florida. So it's just got to be a responsible game there. And they can win those big road games. They did it in Boston. They had a pivotal Game 5 at Madison Square Garden. They came through in that one, and that is a tough building to get a win in. Mm-hmm. So that's what I'm looking for.
And with 2 days off, we have more to think about from now until Game 6 back in Alberta on Friday night, 8 p.m. on ABC once again. But Jacob, I want to thank you so much once again for joining me on this edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, breaking down a 5-3 loss for the Florida Panthers against the Edmonton Oilers. Tell them where they can follow you online.
Yep, you can follow me on X at Jacob Winans 8. And yeah, you'll definitely be hearing from both of us the next couple of days. It's let's hope we wrap this up. But this is a good position to be in at the end of the day. You're up 3-2 in the Stanley Cup final. You can't ask for much more.
Yep, two more chances to clinch it. You just need to win one, right? That's all you need. So yep. We'll see. And this is your last post game of this season. So hopefully when we talk to you next week, we are talking about a Stanley Cup championship. So thank you so much, my friend, for joining. And I will see you next week, my friend.
Looking forward to it.
And if you like what you're hearing, please subscribe to the podcast to be notified every single time the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast jumps into your podcast feed. Don't forget to also subscribe to the other shows on the Locked On NHL network, including Locked On NHL, Locked On Fantasy Hockey with Flip Livingstone and Stu Roden, and Locked On NHL Prospects. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. So I'm Armando Velez with Jacob Winans, and you've been listening to Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We're your team every day.